Homeowner association tried to kick me out of my own home over $48 of debt. We fought back and won. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. I will admit that a lot of what happened to me with my HOA is my own fault, but it does not change the fact that some of them were a bunch of money-hungry, selfish, heartless individuals who have not gotten an ounce of compassion in their bodies. I speak this passionately because I was truly taken advantage of, or at least that is how I felt. Thankfully, I had a guardian angel watching over me. Her name was Beth, and I think that she is the entire reason why everything ended up working out for me in the end. You see, what happened was I had no idea that I had even signed up for an HOA, but I guess that is what I get for not reading papers. About 2 years before everything came up, there were some documents that arrived in the mail saying that they were going to repave the roads in the neighborhood and that I was signing up for a one-time payment to help them with the costs. The streets were in rough shape and everyone was happy about this. What I did not know was that I had officially signed myself up to be a part of the HOA from that moment on. So for 2 years I continued to get papers in the mail and I was just throwing them away because I just assumed it was junk that I did not need. Boy, was I wrong. Finally, 2 years later, I began receiving documents in the mail saying that I was behind on payments for the HOA and that they were going to take measures towards getting their money, like taking my house. Apparently, the payments were $48 a month and I had not paid for 2 years, so that was about $1,200 that I owed them. I went to an HOA board meeting and I said that I would pay their dues, but I was confused how I even owed them anything. Remember, I did not think that I even belonged to an HOA. There was a board of about 7 people and one of them was my neighbor across the street called Beth. The entire time that I was explaining the situation, she continued to listen intently, and when I was finished, she tried to get the other members to allow me an extension of 30 days to pay it before they seized my home. It was only $1,200 after all. The lead member seemed annoyed at Beth's suggestion, saying that I'd already had 2 entire years to pay them their dues. She was not biting and wanted me to pay right away, but legally she had to give me until the next HOA due date, which was about 2 weeks away. I am pretty old and I live on a fixed income, which can be a problem for paying big unexpected bills like this one, so I became quite unsure of how I was going to come up with all of the money. Needless to say, I was going to be short on funds when the deadline reached and the process of the HOA seizing my house began. At that point, fees had stacked up from the HOA on top of what I already owed, meaning that I was in an even more impossible situation. I began packing my things and was even having a small yard sale during the last week that I was allowed to live in the house. My neighbor, Beth, came over to help and even bought several of my old pieces of jewelry and gave me an excellent price for them. She spoke with me for a few minutes about how she was sorry that this was happening to me and she had tried to do more to help. She was always very kind and had an adorable daughter who enjoyed playing with my little dog Shih Tzu Bam Bam. Beth said that some of the other neighbors and board members were upset with them taking my home and evicting me over such a small sum of money. They all say that they would love to see me stay as I have been there longer than any of them and enjoy handing out cookies and gifts to the kids on Christmas and Halloween. I did not realize how many of my neighbors knew me or that I had even left an impression on any of them. I had arranged living with my friend Margie until I could get back on my feet again. She liked the idea of having company anyway and said that we should just stay roommates. I honestly prefer some solitude, so that idea was not as appealing. However, I was happy to have her help, of course. I then had my son over and he was helping me pack things up into the moving truck when Beth came over to talk to us. She said that she was working diligently to stop what was happening and that she was making good headway. I was confused. I had no idea that she was even doing anything like that for me. Why would she, after all? Beth said that she knew it was not in time, but that she still had a few more days to collect money to pay off my debt to the HOA and get my house back. I was shocked, and it honestly made me cry for a moment. She even offered for me to stay at her place for a few days while it was hopefully sorted out. I was not sure what to do. This nice young woman was willing to do this for me, and I could not believe it. That is when a few other neighbors were seen walking down the sidewalk towards my house. After a few minutes, there were over a dozen of my fellow neighbors standing in my yard telling me how they wanted to see me stay. Before I knew it, Beth had all the money she needed to make it happen. As we were celebrating having the funds to save my house, a car drove up to the small crowd. It was the lead HOA board member. She had a sour expression on her face and was asking why we were breaking the neighborhood rules of congregating without a cause. The residents turned on her in a hurry and started saying that she needed to leave and mind her own business. Beth even told her that she was the reason why a nice, sweet woman like myself was getting evicted unfairly. It did not take but a moment of the people gathering around her car and raising their voices before she quickly drove away. She must have realized that this was not her place to be. The next day, Beth applied the money to my HOA debt and I was free of their nasty hold. To make things even better, the neighborhood called for an emergency meeting. We wanted to have a vote on the board members again. The vile HOA leader knew that this was really about her, and she was truly a nasty piece of work when they voted her off of the board. She was even more angry when she saw that they had made Beth her replacement. Now, normally, HOAs are full of villains that only care about themselves, and while it was almost true of my story, there were thankfully some hidden gems among the few toxic members of my neighborhood's HOA board. So, Beth remains the new leader and has continued to be an excellent example of what a great HOA board can do for a neighborhood. They banded together to save this old lady from getting kicked out, and I will forever be thankful for them. And guys, I'm curious, would you ever be willing to live in an HOA, given the amount of stories that you have heard so far? Let us know what you think in the comments, and now let's continue with the stories. The next one is titled Textbook Karen. It's been a while since I've encountered an entitled Karen, especially a male one in the wild. Since I don't go out much in recent times, I gotta thank the pandemic for that. I work from home full-time and rarely drive unless I am grocery shopping or out for an appointment. In my complex, there are non-reserved spots and reserved spots in the underground garage, all of which are not assigned. As long as you have a reserved sticker on your vehicle, any of the reserved spots, which are all labeled reserved, are fair game. I have a non-reserved sticker because it is $40 cheaper than the reserved pass. I was coming back from an appointment and turned into my neighbor's reserved spot so that I could back my car into the open, non-reserved spot behind me. Lo and behold, male Karen in his rusty 2007 RAV4 starts honking at me for being in his spot, telling me that I cannot park there because I don't have a reserved sticker. I told him I was only backing out. I probably should have let it go, but his Karen-ness pissed me off so much. As I was getting on the elevator, I quickly realized he only wanted to park there because it was right next to the elevator. A light bulb went off in my head and I made my way to the rental office, it's in the same building, and asked to upgrade my parking pass. It's an extra $40 I'll be shelling out, but it is worth the petty revenge. I am waiting for him to leave for work tomorrow so I can move my car into his spot and leave it there for God knows how long. There are perks to being fully remote. And guys, if you are still working remotely or from the office, let us know in the comments which one you prefer. I definitely enjoy working from home. The next one is titled Boss Gets Revenge. Today's story requires some background info, so buckle up. I work in a hospital and to be precise, I work in the logistical part of it. Nothing fancy or as important as the work nurses and doctors do, but I'm responsible for some important parts that keep everything running. I make sure to take my work as serious as I can do and always try to be as polite as ever. Although I also think that being polite is kind of something that should be normal. Anyway, back to my story. Last week something went wrong in a machine that gives out the uniforms for the nurses. I see it as one huge vending machine that holds like 300 scrubs. It is pretty important that the machine keeps running day or night, and since I do the night shifts, it's my job that it does. However, on that one day last week, Tuesday to be specific, a malfunction happened and the machine stopped working. We only found out the next day, and at that time it was already too late. Lots of angry nurses, which was understandable. When I arrived at my work, my boss was already waiting for me in the office. She took me aside and made sure I understood what I did wrong. She blamed me for making everyone work in old and dirty clothes and for costing the company, we are not part of the hospital, money. I accepted it as it was during my shift. What did bother me though was that I made sure everything worked perfectly fine that Tuesday. I always make sure to check it at least 3 times before I leave, but apparently not this time. Fast forward to this week's Tuesday, something interesting happened. The company I worked for looked into the machine and the program it runs on. Turns on that it was not actually my fault at all. An update did not work out as it was supposed to be and it was not patched in time. My boss told all this to me with a big smile without making any effort to apologize. So, after she left, I made sure to take my revenge. I kept it small, so she would not really notice it. My revenge. On the first day, Tuesday, I diluted the Coke she always drinks. I poured out some Coke and added water to it, then mixed it together and left the cap off until my shift was over. Say goodbye to your carbonated drink. On Wednesday, I took the batteries from her mouse and put them in backwards so it would not work anymore. And today, which is Thursday, I flip back one of the tiny legs of her keyboard. You won't notice it when you stand near it, but when you try to type on it, it will wiggle around. Very annoying for about a second. Tomorrow Friday, I will make the hole puncher she uses a little shorter. Not noticeable when you look at it, but definitely when you use it. As for the next week, I'm not sure yet, but I'm quitting soon, so maybe give her my 2 weeks notice. The next one is titled Landlord Malicious Compliance. So, for context, me and my fiancé live in the USA and had an opportunity in another state that required us to move pretty quickly. Our lease required 60 days of notice before we move out plus a buyout fee, but because of the situation we were not able to give 60 days of notice. We are also already not really happy with our landlord because she called us 6 days before we moved into this unit, about 10 months before all this went down, and told us that she would have to delay our move-in by a week and move us to a completely different unit because the people in our unit decided last minute not to move out, despite being required by the same lease we signed. Not that I want to kick these people out on their butts with no place to stay, but our landlord did not really apologize to us. Instead, just emphasized how much of a tough situation these tenants put her in by remaining in our unit. In an emergency, we had to stay with my fiancé's family for that week before moving in. On top of that, she really has not been the best while we have lived here. The only way the office will accept any kind of correspondence from residents is through their online portal. We are not allowed to email them directly, only call, and even then we cannot place maintenance requests over the phone, and the online portal has been down a total of almost 90 days that we have lived there. Not 90 days in a row, but there was a 2-month period where it was down completely, and it was down sporadically throughout the rest of our stay. No alternative for the portal was ever provided. So anyway, here's the story. I sent our landlord an email letting her know that we needed to move out soon. I think the date was 45 days from when I sent the email. In the email I included that we understood our financial obligation and that we intended to continue paying rent through the end of our lease since we are really not giving her 60 days notice before the move out. I wanted to give her the courtesy of being able to rent out the unit or at least begin to look for other renters and have them move in sooner, or the unit remains occupied and they can rent it out even sooner. Our landlord shoots back insisting that we must give 60 days notice before moving out and that we must pay the buyout fee to leave early. The buyout fee was about 3 months of rent and we had 3 months left on the lease, so we would have to pay the 60 days of rent and then the buyout fee on top of that. She stressed that we needed to read the lease before bothering her because all of this info was already in there. On top of that, she included several pages of the lease, including the page with the clause about needing to move out if another tenant has signed a lease for your unit. So cue malicious compliance. Maybe it was her including that clause that upset me, but I had enough at that point. I emailed her back and simply said, "Upon further review of our lease, we have decided to stay until the end of our lease on X date." As that date is more than 60 days away, I hope it is alright if you consider this our notice that we are moving out and don't plan on renewing our lease. Thank you. A couple weeks later, my fiancée and I packed our bags and moved out, leaving the unit empty. My aunt and uncle live nearby, so we gave them the keys. They went to check on the unit and run the lights and the water about once a week to make sure everything was still working. Our landlord emailed us a couple times near the end of our lease asking if we would be out of the unit so they could bring their new tenants in to tour the unit. Unfortunately for her, we were always busy and the apartment was never clean, so she could not give them a tour of our unit. When our lease was up, I took a trip back to town to drop off the keys and do the final checkout. Overall, we saved several $1,000s that we would have had to pay in rent, and we cost her several thousands in revenue from not renting out her empty unit for 2 months. She was none the wiser. And guys, if you have ever gotten revenge on your awful landlord, then please let us know in the comments what you did. And the last one is titled, I just did what the landlord told me to do. This happened in 2K19. I just moved to a new apartment. It was a 3-bedroom first floor apartment and it had a finished basement. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room and a kitchen on the first floor. It also had a bedroom with a full bath in the basement and a bar/gaming area. It was also in a very nice area of the city. The apartment was owned by a corporation. Honestly, we loved that apartment until it kept having recurring issues in the basement. The carpet was wet from time to time. At first the landlord would send a cleaner to come and handle it, but it keeps happening. I asked them to check and fix the issue. They didn't do it. I told him I will call the city inspector to check the building. They laughed at me and told me, go ahead, call the city inspector. So that is what I did. I called the city twice until I finally was connected to the right department and they sent an inspector a week later. The inspector found so many building violations, they told me they would contact the building owner and then would come again. The next day the owner called and begged me to tell them what I know about the problem with the apartment. I told them that I sent complaints multiple times, they should check their record. The city inspector, the owner and the property manager came 2 weeks after that. The city inspector was whooping their butts. He laid it to them that it was bad. They have to deal with structural and foundational issues and some safety issues too. There were 4 tenants in that building, including us. Imagine it was a big colonial/multi-family home divided into 4 apartments. They had to break the lease with all of us to fix the building. They couldn't fix it with us being there. We were ready and already consulted a lawyer, so we told them the following. Number 1, we want our deposit back before moving out. Number 2, they paid for all our moving expenses. And last, they paid for our deposit at the next place. They couldn't kick us out, they could not rent the apartment after the inspections. There were 4 of us and we could all sue them for placing us in a dangerous building. In the end, they spent so much money to relocate us and fix the apartment. Clarifications: the other tenants received money and compensation from the landlord too. They also got their moving cost covered as well. I did not make them homeless, some of them thanked me. Also, we moved to a new neighborhood that was only 5 minutes walk to my office. It was a single family house. We loved the neighborhood and it was LGBTQ friendly. We stayed there for a year until we bought our house and the rent was actually cheaper. The building was owned by a corporation, so when I say landlord, it refers to the owner and property manager. I hope they learned their lesson. And yeah guys, if you want to hear more stories about people getting revenge on their landlords, then please let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow.